The thunder cracked like a whip against the darkening Colorado sky as Lily Adams dashed beneath the awning of Mabel's dress emporium, her auburn hair now plastered to her face from the sudden downpour. Las Animas wasn't known for its rainstorms, especially not in June of 1878, but the heavens had opened without warning, sending townspeople scurrying for shelter. Lily clutched the worn letter in her hand, the ink now running slightly from raindrops that had found their mark. The words were already seared into her memory, anyway, a summons from her aunt, insisting she come for a final fitting of the dress she would wear to the town's Founders' Day celebration, where she was expected to make a favorable impression on the banker's son. There you are, Lily Adams. I was beginning to think you might not show up at all. Aunt Harriet's voice cut through the comfortable chatter of the shop before Lily had even fully closed the door behind her. I'm sorry, Aunt Harriet, the rain, never mind the rain, we have work to do. Her aunt gestured impatiently toward the back room. Mabel has been waiting, and you know her time is valuable. Lily nodded and followed her aunt through the main room of the dress shop, past bolts of colorful fabrics and half-finished garments on headless mannequins. She felt the familiar tightness in her chest that always accompanied these fittings, the inevitable disappointment that would cloud her aunt's eyes when the fabric wouldn't quite close around Lily's generous curves. Mabel Green, a thin woman with spectacles perched on her nose, looked up from her sewing when they entered. Miss Adams, right on time despite the weather, the dress is ready for its final fitting. Behind Mabel hung the pale blue dress that had been commissioned for Lily, a delicate confection of silk and lace that looked like it might dissolve in the rain. It was beautiful, but Lily's heart sank. Even from here, she could see it was far too small for her frame. Well, don't just stand there, Aunt Harriet said. Let's see if Mabel's adjustments have done the trick. With reluctant fingers, Lily began to unbutton her sodden jacket. At 22, she had long since accepted that she would never have the willowy figure that was currently in fashion. Her mother had been the same, round in all the places society preferred angles, generous where restraint was admired. Before consumption had taken her mother 2 years ago, Lily had never given it much thought. Her father had always looked at her mother like she'd hung the moon and stars, curves and all. But since coming to live with her aunt after her father's passing 6 months ago, Lily had been subjected to a constant barrage of commentary about her figure, her appetite, and her prospects or lack thereof. The Stevenson boy has good prospects, Aunt Harriet was saying as Mabel helped Lily into the dress. His father owns the bank and they're looking to expand. A smart match would secure your future, which heaven knows your father failed to do before his passing. Lily bit her tongue, unwilling to defend her father in this moment of vulnerability as she stood in her chemise. Her father had been many things: a loving parent, a skilled carpenter, a man who laughed easily and forgave quickly. That he had not been a savvy businessman was true enough, but Lily could not bear to hear him maligned. Arms up, Mabel instructed, lowering the dress carefully over Lily's head. The silk was cool against her skin, but as the seamstress began to work on the row of tiny buttons down the back, Lily felt the familiar resistance. Take a deep breath in and hold it, Mabel instructed, her fingers working frantically at the closures. Lily complied, drawing in her stomach as much as possible, feeling the fabric strain across her back and bust. 3 buttons from the top, Mabel stopped, her fingers falling away, I'm afraid. The seamstress began, oh, for heaven's sake. Aunt Harriet stepped forward, examining the gap where the dress refused to close. Lily, you simply must have been indulging in Mrs. Peterson's pies again. I told you to be mindful of your portions. Heat rose to Lily's cheeks. I haven't, Aunt Harriet, truly. Well, something must be done. Her aunt turned to Mabel. Can you let it out any more? The celebration is in 3 days. Mabel shook her head, lips pursed. I've let it out as far as the seams allow, Mrs. Fletcher. Any more and the dress will lose its shape entirely. Then what do you suggest? Aunt Harriet's voice had taken on the edge that Lily had come to dread. Perhaps. Mabel hesitated. Perhaps a different style altogether, something with a fuller skirt to balance the proportions. I have a pattern that might. Nonsense. The blue silk was costly and I won't waste it. Lily will simply need to adjust herself to fit the dress. Lily stared at her reflection in the looking glass. The dress was beautiful, even half-buttoned as it was. The color brought out the blue in her eyes, and the cut would have been flattering if only there were more of it. But as it was, she looked like a sausage straining against its casing, her flesh threatening to burst the delicate seams. I can make a corset that will help, Mabel offered reluctantly. Something stronger than her usual one, with enough lacing. Yes, that will have to do. Aunt Harriet nodded decisively. Lily, you'll need to start wearing it immediately to acclimate yourself, and no more than broth and tea until after the celebration. Lily's stomach clenched at the thought, both of the restricted diet and of being laced so tightly she could scarcely breathe. But before she could protest, the shop door banged open and heavy footsteps sounded in the front room. "Mabel, you in here," a deep voice called out. "Got that order of buttons from Denver you were waiting on." "In the back, Samuel," Mabel called, relief evident in her voice at the interruption. "Just finishing up with Miss Adams." Heavy boots approached, and then a man appeared in the doorway, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled slightly where it met the collar of his denim shirt. He stopped abruptly when he saw the tableau before him. Mabel with pins in her mouth, Aunt Harriet with her lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval, and Lily, half-dressed in a too-small gown, her cheeks flaming with embarrassment. "Pardon me, ladies," he said, quickly averting his eyes from Lily. "Didn't realize you had company, Mabel. Samuel Dixon, what have I told you about barging in?" Mabel scolded, but there was no real heat in her words. "These are private fittings, my apologies." He tipped his hat, still keeping his gaze firmly on the floor. "I'll just leave these out front and be on my way." "Wait," Mabel said, moving toward him. "Since you're here, perhaps you could offer an opinion." She gestured toward Lily. "Miss Adams is preparing for the Founders' Day celebration, but we're having some difficulties with the fit." Samuel Dixon looked up then, his eyes meeting Lily's in the mirror. She expected to see the usual judgment, or worse, pity, but instead found only warmth in his gaze. "Seems to me the dress is the problem, not the lady," he said, his voice matter of fact. Aunt Harriet made a small, indignant noise. "Mr. Dixon, I don't think it's a beautiful color," he continued, speaking directly to Lily now. "Brings out your eyes something fierce. But begging your pardon, it looks like they made that dress for a child, not a woman." Lily stared at him, speechless. In the 6 months she'd been in Los Animas, no one had ever spoken so plainly in her defense, especially not regarding her figure. "Mr. Dixon," Aunt Harriet said coldly, "fashion dictates certain standards which my niece is unfortunately struggling to meet, not that it's any of your concern." Samuel Dixon finally turned his attention to Lily's aunt, and for a moment, Lily saw something like anger flash in his eyes before it was carefully banked. "With respect, madam, I've seen a fair share of this country, and I can tell you that real beauty doesn't come from squeezing yourself into someone else's idea of proper." He looked back at Lily, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "The dress should fit the woman, not the other way around." "And what would a delivery man know about ladies' fashion?" Aunt Harriet scoffed. "Not much, I'll grant you that," he admitted with an easy shrug. "But I know what catches a man's eye, and it ain't a woman who can't breathe proper because her dress is cutting her in half." Despite her embarrassment, Lily felt a bubble of laughter rise in her throat. She quickly suppressed it when her aunt shot her a warning look. "Thank you for your insight, Mr. Dixon," Mabel said diplomatically. "Now, if you'll excuse us, we need to continue our fitting." "Of course." He nodded, placing a small package on a nearby table. "Your buttons, as promised." He turned to go but paused at the doorway to look back at Lily. "Miss Adams, for what it's worth, I think you look just fine as you are. Don't change a thing." With that, he was gone, his boots echoing on the wooden floor of the shop before the front door opened and closed. A stunned silence filled the room in his wake. "Well," Aunt Harriet finally exclaimed. "The nerve of that man, speaking so inappropriately to a lady he's never even been introduced to." But Lily barely heard her aunt's indignation. She was still looking at the doorway where Samuel Dixon had stood, his words ringing in her ears. "Don't change a thing." Something shifted inside her chest, not the uncomfortable pressure of a too-tight dress, but something lighter, something that felt dangerously like hope. "Aunt Harriet," she said, finding her voice at last, "I think perhaps Mabel's suggestion of a different style might be worth considering after all." Lily's thoughts kept returning to the encounter at Mabel's shop as she walked home through Las Animas the following morning. The rain had cleared, leaving behind a freshly scrubbed sky and air that smelled of damp earth and sage. She was supposed to be at the general store selecting ribbons for her hair, but her feet had taken her on a detour past the livery stable instead. She told herself it was mere curiosity after all. How many men in town would have dared to speak so plainly to her aunt? But deep down, she knew she was hoping for another glimpse of Samuel Dixon with his direct gaze and unvarnished opinions. The stable doors were open wide to catch the morning breeze. Lily slowed her pace, peering inside without being too obvious. The smell of hay and horses filled her nostrils, along with the sharper scent of leather and oil. A man was working at the far end, his back to her as he saddled a handsome chestnut mare. "Can I help you, miss?" The voice came from behind her, making Lily jump. She turned to find Samuel Dixon standing there, a half-smile playing on his lips as he recognized her. Without the distraction of her embarrassing situation at the dress shop, Lily could now appreciate his features properly, the strong line of his jaw darkened by a day's growth of beard, the slight cleft in his chin, and eyes the color of coffee with just a touch of cream. "Mr. Dixon," she said, willing her voice to remain steady, "I was just passing by, on your way to." He raised an eyebrow, clearly aware that the livery wasn't on the way to anywhere a lady would typically be going. "I wanted to thank you," Lily said, deciding honesty was the best approach. "For what you said yesterday, it was unexpected. Didn't mean to embarrass you," he replied, shifting the saddle he was carrying from one arm to the other. "Just don't much care for seeing folks trying to hammer square pegs into round holes." "Is that what I am, a square peg?" Lily asked, a smile tugging at her lips despite herself. Samuel's eyes crinkled at the corners. "You're no peg at all, Miss Adams. You're a woman who shouldn't have to apologize for looking like one." Heat rose to Lily's cheeks again, but this time it wasn't from embarrassment. "My aunt doesn't share your view, I'm afraid. Your aunt strikes me as someone who's spent too much time worrying about what other folks think." He nodded toward the saddle. "Mind if I put this down while we talk? Gets heavy after a while." "Oh, of course." Lily stepped aside, suddenly aware that she was keeping him from his work. "I shouldn't keep you, not keeping me from anything important," he assured her, setting the saddle on a nearby rail. "Though if your aunt catches you conversing with the delivery man again, I reckon I'll be in for another lecture on propriety." Lily laughed. "She did go on for quite some time after you left. I bet she did." He leaned against the stable post, crossing his arms. "So did you take Mabel up on her offer for a different dress? I'm going back this afternoon to discuss options." Lily sighed. "Though Aunt Harriet is still determined to make me fit that blue monstrosity." "And what do you want?" The question took Lily by surprise. Since her parents' deaths, no one had asked what she wanted, not about dresses or suitors or even where she might like to live. She'd been too busy trying to be grateful for her aunt's reluctant charity. "I want." She began, then paused, considering. "I want to be able to breathe and eat. And dance without fear of bursting a seam." Samuel nodded seriously, though his eyes danced with amusement. "Seems reasonable enough." "My aunt would disagree. She says a woman my age needs to secure a husband before she's considered." Lily hesitated, embarrassed to repeat her aunt's exact words. "Before she's considered what?" Samuel prompted. "A spinster," Lily admitted. "Or worse, a burden." Something hardened in Samuel's expression. "You're what, 20, 22? Hardly at risk of spinsterhood, and as for being a burden," he shook his head. "Folks who view family as burdens are the ones with the problem, not you." Lily studied him, this man who seemed to see the world so differently from everyone else in Las Animas. "You're not from around here, are you, Mr. Dixon?" "Sam," he corrected. "And no, came west from Missouri about 5 years back. Worked cattle drives until last winter when I took a bad fall. Horse rolled on my leg." He patted his left thigh. Healed well enough, but ranching work got a bit harder. So I took up with Johnson at the livery, doing deliveries and such until I figure out my next move. I'm sorry about your injury, Lily said sincerely. He shrugged. Life takes turns, just got to ride with them. He glanced past her down the street. Speaking of turns, isn't that your aunt heading this way? Lily whirled around to see Aunt Harriet marching toward them, parasol clutched like a weapon in her gloved hand. Oh dear, she murmured. I told her I was going to the mercantile. Better run along then, Sam said, straightening up from his casual pose. Don't want to cause you more trouble. Thank you again, Mr. Dixon. Sam, Lily said quickly, already backing away. For everything, don't mention it. His smile was warm. And remember what I said, Miss Adams. Don't change a thing. With that, he tipped his hat and disappeared into the stable, leaving Lily to intercept her aunt before she could follow to deliver another lecture on proper behavior for a young lady. Lily Adams, what on earth are you doing at the livery? Aunt Harriet demanded when Lily reached her. I've been looking all over for you. We're expected at the Stevensons for tea in an hour. I was just taking a different route to the mercantile, Lily explained, falling into step beside her aunt as they turned back toward the center of town. The morning is so lovely after the rain. Aunt Harriet eyed her suspiciously but seemed to accept the explanation. Well, there's no time for ribbons now. We'll have to make do with what you have. The Stevensons are not people to keep waiting. As her aunt continued detailing the importance of the upcoming tea and the need for Lily to make a good impression on Walter Stevenson, Lily found her thoughts drifting back to the livery and to a pair of kind eyes that had really looked at her perhaps for the first time since she'd arrived in Los Animas. The Stevenson home sat on a hill overlooking the town, its white clapboard siding and green shutters a testament to the banker's prosperity. Inside, the parlor was stifling despite the open windows, the June heat intensified by the formal attire everyone wore and the hot tea being served. Lily sat uncomfortably on a horsehair sofa, her corset laced as tightly as she could stand in preparation for another fitting later that day. Beside her, Walter Stevenson droned on about the expanding railroad and his father's investment opportunities, pausing occasionally to ask if she agreed, though her opinion was clearly not actually sought. It's all about vision, you see, Walter was saying, his thin mustache quivering with enthusiasm. Father says a man without vision is like a bank without a vault, nothing to protect, nothing to grow. How insightful, Lily managed, sipping her tea to avoid having to say more. Walter was not an unpleasant man, merely dull, with a tendency to view everything through the lens of financial prospects. At 25, he was considered one of Los Animas's most eligible bachelors, a status Lily suspected had more to do with his father's bank than with any personal qualities. Across the room, Aunt Harriet was deep in conversation with Mrs. Stevenson, both women occasionally glancing Lily's way with calculating expressions. It was clear to everyone that this tea was more of an inspection than a social call. Miss Adams, father mentioned that your late father was in carpentry, Walter continued. A respectable trade, to be sure, though not one known for its financial security. My father was an artist, Lily corrected gently. Every piece he created was unique. He built the altar at the church in our hometown, and the governor of Kansas commissioned him to make a desk for his office. Walter's eyebrows rose slightly. Indeed. Well, craft has its place, I suppose, though mass production is where the real money lies these days, efficiency over artistry. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. I understand your situation is somewhat tenuous since his passing. A woman needs stability, especially one without, significant prospects of her own. Lily tensed, knowing he was referencing not just her lack of fortune but her physical appearance as well. In Walter's world, she was doubly disadvantaged, neither wealthy nor willowy. I have found that true security comes from within, Mr. Stevenson, she replied, setting her teacup down with a soft clink. My father taught me that. A charming sentiment, Walter said with a patronizing smile, but hardly practical in today's world. A woman needs a man's protection, especially one who might otherwise struggle to find her place in society. The implication was clear. He was doing her a favor by considering her as a potential wife, despite her shortcomings. Lily felt her cheeks burn, but this time with indignation rather than embarrassment. Before she could formulate a response that wouldn't horrify her aunt, the conversation was interrupted by Mrs. Stevenson calling for more tea. "Walter, dear, why don't you show Miss Adams the view from the garden?" "The roses are particularly fine this year," his mother suggested, with a meaningful look toward Aunt Harriet. "An excellent idea, Mother," Walter agreed, standing and offering Lily his arm. "Miss Adams." With no graceful way to refuse, Lily allowed herself to be escorted outside to the garden that stretched behind the house. The air was mercifully cooler here, with a light breeze rustling the leaves of the cottonwood trees that lined the property. Walter led her to a wrought iron bench beside a bed of roses, positioning himself close enough that their shoulders nearly touched when they sat. Lily subtly shifted to increase the distance between them. "My mother has worked wonders with these gardens," Walter said, gesturing around them. "She's always said that a proper home needs a woman's touch. My future wife will, of course, have free rein to redecorate the east wing to her liking." Lily blinked at the presumption. "You speak as though you've already decided on your future wife, Mr. Stevenson." "Well," he said, his smile smug, "Father has always said that when you know what you want, you should move decisively to acquire it, business or pleasure." "I wasn't aware that wives were acquired like business assets," Lily remarked, unable to keep the edge from her voice. Walter laughed as if she'd said something charming. "You have spirit, Miss Adams. That's refreshing. Most young ladies are so concerned with appearing proper that they become quite dull. Though, of course, a wife must understand her place once the vows are exchanged." Lily stared at him, wondering if he could possibly be as oblivious as he seemed. "And what place is that exactly?" "Why, as the heart of the home, naturally," he replied smoothly. "Overseeing the household, raising children, supporting her husband's ambitions, the natural order of things." "And her own ambitions?" Walter looked genuinely perplexed. What ambitions would those be? Lily thought of her father's workshop, of the hours she'd spent beside him learning to sand wood to a silken finish, to carve delicate patterns into chair backs and table edges. She'd sold 3 of her own small pieces before his illness had consumed their lives and finances. That workshop and all its tools had been sold to pay for doctors who ultimately couldn't save him. "Never mind," she said quietly. Walter seemed relieved to move past what he clearly viewed as an odd tangent. "I've spoken with your aunt about my intentions, and she seemed most enthusiastic. I thought perhaps after the Founders' Day celebration, we might announce an official courtship." "By Christmas we could, Mr. Stevenson," Lily interrupted, rising from the bench. "I think you're getting rather ahead of yourself. We've barely been introduced." He stood as well, his expression confident. "Come now, Miss Adams, we both know your situation. Your aunt has made it clear that her home is not a permanent solution for you, and while you may not be the conventional beauty that some men seek, I am practical enough to see the value in a wife who is substantial." Lily felt as if she'd been slapped. Substantial. "I mean no offense," Walter hurried to add, misreading her expression as hurt rather than anger. "Some men prefer a more robust figure, and you have a pleasant enough face. With the right guidance, you could become a suitable banker's wife." "How fortunate for me that you're willing to overlook my robustness," Lily said, her voice tight with restrained emotion. Walter beamed, entirely missing her sarcasm. "Exactly. I've always prided myself on seeing potential where others might not. It's what makes me a good banker." Lily took a deep breath, acutely aware of her aunt watching from the parlor window. Making a scene would only worsen her already precarious position in her aunt's home. But neither could she stand here and allow this man to believe she was grateful for his condescension. "Mr. Stevenson," she said carefully, "while I appreciate your candor, I believe there has been a misunderstanding. I am not currently seeking a husband, regardless of my circumstances." His smile faltered. "Surely you don't mean to become a burden on your aunt indefinitely." "No," Lily replied, surprised to find she meant it. "I don't." Before Walter could respond, they were interrupted by the arrival of a housemaid announcing that Aunt Harriet was ready to depart. Walter escorted Lily back inside, his expression now uncertain, as if recalculating a sum that suddenly didn't add up. The walk back to town was filled with Aunt Harriet's effusive praise of Walter Stevenson and pointed comments about Lily's good fortune in catching his eye. Lily remained silent, her mind racing with the realization that had crystallized in the Stevensons' garden. She would not marry a man who saw her as a convenient acquisition, a substantial woman whose gratitude would ensure her compliance. But if not that, then what? Her aunt's patience was wearing thin, her inheritance from her father was nearly depleted, and her options in Las Animas seemed limited to spinsterhood, continued dependence, or a loveless marriage. As they approached Mabel's shop for the afternoon fitting, Lily's eyes were drawn to the livery stable down the street. A figure she recognized immediately as Sam Dixon was loading packages into a wagon, his movements efficient and strong. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up, catching her eye across the distance. He touched the brim of his hat in greeting, a simple gesture that nonetheless sent a flutter through her chest. "Lily, are you listening to me?" Aunt Harriet's sharp voice broke through her thoughts. "I said we must ensure this fitting goes better than yesterday's. Walter clearly has serious intentions, and you must look your best for the celebration. It could be the beginning of a whole new life for you." Lily nodded absently, her eyes still on the livery. "Yes," she murmured. A whole new life. But for the first time since arriving in Las Animas, she was beginning to wonder if that life might look very different from what her aunt had planned. The final fitting at Mabel's shop proceeded with less drama than the previous day's session. After much debate, Aunt Harriet had reluctantly agreed to a compromise. The bodice of the blue silk dress would be recut to accommodate Lily's figure, while a complementary fabric would be added to create a draped overskirt that both added visual interest and provided more room where needed. "It's still not ideal," Aunt Harriet sniffed as Mabel pinned the new pieces in place, "but I suppose it will have to do given the time constraints." "I think it's going to be lovely," Mabel countered, her mouth full of pins. "The contrasting fabric actually makes it more fashionable, not less. I saw a similar design in a fashion plate from Paris just last month." Lily stood quietly, watching her reflection transform as Mabel worked. The dress now followed her natural curves instead of fighting them, the deep blue silk complemented by a lighter blue brocade that caught the light when she moved. "Turn, please," Mabel instructed, and Lily obeyed, the skirt swirling gracefully around her ankles. For the first time, she felt a flicker of excitement about the Founders' Day celebration. In this dress, she could move, breathe, perhaps even dance without fear of disaster. She wondered fleetingly if Sam Dixon would be attending, then quickly pushed the thought away. Even if he were there, a delivery man with a healing leg would hardly be considered appropriate company by her aunt or the Stevensons. "Well, I must admit it's an improvement," Aunt Harriet conceded as Mabel stepped back to assess her work. "Though I still think a firmer corset would have solved the original problem. The dress should fit the woman, not the other way around," Lily murmured, echoing Sam's words from the day before. "What was that?" her aunt asked sharply. "Nothing important," Lily replied, smoothing her hands over the fabric. "When will it be ready, Miss Green?" "I can have it completed by tomorrow afternoon," Mabel promised, "just in time for the celebration." As Mabel helped her out of the pinned dress, Lily's mind drifted to the conversation in the Stevensons' garden. Walter's presumption still rankled, but more disturbing was the realization that, until recently, she might have accepted his proposal out of sheer necessity. Her father's death had left her adrift, her grief compounded by the loss of their home and workshop. Aunt Harriet had offered shelter, but at the cost of Lily's independence and dignity. Each day brought a new criticism, a new reminder that she was dependent on her aunt's charity. Back in her regular clothes, Lily followed her aunt out of the shop into the late afternoon sunlight. The main street of Las Animas was busy with people completing their day's business before evening fell. Wagons rattled past, kicking up dust that glowed golden in the slanting light. "I need to stop at the mercantile for thread," Aunt Harriet announced. "You may wait outside if you prefer. The heat in there can be stifling this time of day." Grateful for the reprieve, Lily settled onto a bench in front of the store. From this vantage point, she could see most of the town's main street, the saloon with its swinging doors, the barbershop where men gathered to exchange news and gossip, and at the far end, the livery stable where Sam Dixon had challenged her to see herself differently. As if conjured by her thoughts, a wagon appeared from the direction of the livery, Sam at the reins. He drove slowly down the street, stopping occasionally to make deliveries. Lily watched his easy movements, the way he tipped his hat to ladies and exchanged friendly words with everyone he encountered. There was something about his manner that spoke of confidence without arrogance, strength without intimidation. The wagon drew closer to the mercantile, and Lily found herself smoothing her hair, sitting a bit straighter on the bench. When Sam finally spotted her, his face broke into a warm smile that made her heart beat a little faster. "Miss Adams," he greeted her, pulling the wagon to a stop. "Twice in one day, people will talk. Let them," Lily replied with a boldness that surprised even herself. "How are your deliveries coming along? Just about finished. This is my last stop." He nodded toward the mercantile. "Got a shipment of nails and tools for Mr. Peterson." "My aunt is inside," Lily warned. "She might not be pleased to see us conversing again." Sam's eyes twinkled with mischief. "Then I reckon I'd better make my delivery quick and be on my way before she catches me corrupting her niece with more dangerous ideas about dresses fitting women instead of the other way around." Lily laughed, the sound drawing the attention of a couple walking past, who gave her a curious look. Ladies didn't often laugh so freely on Main Street, especially not while talking to delivery men. "How did your fitting go?" Sam asked, his expression growing more serious. "Did Mabel work her magic?" "She did," Lily confirmed. "The dress is being remade to fit me properly. It will be ready tomorrow." "Glad to hear it." He seemed genuinely pleased. "You'll be the belle of the Founders' Day celebration, I reckon. Will you be attending?" The question slipped out before Lily could consider its impropriety. Sam's expression turned regretful. "Afraid not. Johnson has me scheduled for a delivery run to Pueblo that day. Won't be back until late." "Oh," Lily tried to hide her disappointment. "That's a shame. The celebration is supposed to be quite something, fireworks and all." "I've seen fireworks before," he said with a shrug. "Though I expect they'd look finer with the right company." The implication hung in the air between them, an acknowledgement of whatever this was that seemed to be growing between them, something tender and new, but also impossible given their different stations in Los Animas society. Before Lily could respond, the mercantile door opened, and Aunt Harriet emerged, her expression souring immediately upon seeing Sam's wagon. "Mr. Dixon," she said coldly, "I wasn't aware you made deliveries to the mercantile." "Yes, madam," Sam replied respectfully, though Lily noted a certain tension in his jaw. "Got a shipment of hardware for Mr. Peterson." "I see." Her aunt turned to Lily. "We should be getting home. I need to finalize the menu for our dinner with the Stevensons tomorrow night." Another dinner. Lily couldn't keep the dismay from her voice. "Walter specifically requested it," Aunt Harriet replied with barely concealed satisfaction. "Before the celebration, he has something important he wishes to discuss with you." Sam's expression remained neutral, but Lily saw his hands tighten on the reins. "I'll just be a moment delivering these supplies, madam," he said to Aunt Harriet. "Don't mean to delay your return home." "See that you don't," her aunt replied, then turned to enter the store again, presumably to inform Mr. Peterson of his delivery. Once she was gone, Sam looked back at Lily, his expression now serious. "Walter Stevenson, it's not what you think," Lily began, then stopped. What did he think? And why did his opinion matter so much to her after just 2 brief encounters? "Don't need to explain anything to me," Sam said, his voice careful now. "Banker's son is a good match, stable future." "A stable cage," Lily corrected before she could stop herself. Sam studied her for a long moment, something shifting in his gaze. You deserve better than a cage, Lily Adams, no matter how gilded it might be. It was the first time he'd used her first name, and the sound of it in his deep voice sent a thrill through her that had nothing to do with propriety and everything to do with possibility. Before she could reply, Aunt Harriet reappeared with Mr. Peterson, who began directing Sam on where to unload his delivery. With a last significant look at Lily, Sam tipped his hat and went to work, leaving her to follow her aunt home with her thoughts in turmoil. That night, as Lily prepared for bed in the small room her aunt had grudgingly provided, she found herself standing before the mirror, examining her reflection with new eyes. The lamplight cast a warm glow on her skin as she loosened her hair from its pins, letting it fall in waves around her shoulders. For so long, she had seen herself through her aunt's critical gaze, too full here, too round there, always lacking in one way or another. But now, remembering the way Sam Dixon had looked at her, she began to see something different. Strength in her arms from years of working alongside her father, grace in the curves her aunt so deplored, character in the face that might never be considered classically beautiful but was uniquely, undeniably hers. "Don't change a thing," he had said. Such simple words, yet they had taken root inside her, growing into something that felt dangerously like courage. Tomorrow would bring another dinner with the Stevensons, where Walter would likely make his intentions official. Her aunt would expect gratitude, the Stevensons would expect compliance. And Los Animas society would nod approvingly at a match that solved the problem of Harriet Fletcher's burdensome niece. But for the first time since her father's death had left her at the mercy of others' expectations, Lily felt the stirring of her own desires not just to escape a loveless match, but to build something true and meaningful from the wreckage of her former life. She thought of Sam Dixon, heading to Pueblo on Founder's Day, away from a celebration where he would be barely tolerated at the fringes even if he were in town. She thought of Walter Stevenson, already planning where to place her in his orderly life like a piece of furniture acquired at a favorable price. And she thought of her father, who had taught her that true craftsmanship couldn't be rushed or forced whether in wood or in life. "The grain tells you where to cut," he used to say. "Try to work against it and you'll only end up with splinters and regret." As she blew out her lamp and climbed into bed, Lily made a decision. Tomorrow, at the Stevensons' dinner, she would follow the grain of her own heart, wherever it might lead her. She would no longer try to fit herself into a dress or a life that was never meant for her in the first place. The evening at the Stevensons' unfolded exactly as Lily had feared. The dining room was stifling despite the open windows. The conversation centered entirely on banking prospects and property values, and Walter's attention to her bordered on proprietary. Throughout the meal, she felt her aunt's expectant gaze and misses. Stevenson's calculating one, both women clearly anticipating the moment when Walter would make his move. That moment came after dinner, when Mr. Stevenson suggested that Walter show Lily his collection of mineral specimens from the nearby mountains. It was a transparent excuse to allow them a few minutes of privacy, and everyone at the table understood the real purpose. "I'd be delighted," Walter said, standing and offering Lily his arm. "Miss Adams." With no graceful way to refuse, Lily rose and accompanied him to a small study off the main hall. Glass-fronted cabinets lined one wall, filled with rocks and crystals neatly labeled and arranged. "My hobby," Walter explained, gesturing toward the collection. "I find geology combines the practical understanding what resources might be extracted for profit with the aesthetic pleasure of nature's wonders. They're very orderly," Lily observed, noting how each specimen had been placed precisely in relation to the others, with no variation in spacing or arrangement. "Order is the foundation of success," Walter replied, moving to stand beside her, close enough that she could smell the pomade in his hair. "In business and in personal affairs." Lily steeled herself for what was coming. "Miss Adams, Lily," Walter began, turning to face her. "Over these past weeks, I've come to appreciate your many fine qualities. You are sensible, well-mannered, and come from respectable, if modest, stock." While you may not possess the conventional attributes that some men seek in a wife, I find your substantial nature appealing in its way. Lily bit the inside of her cheek, fighting the urge to correct his persistent use of substantial as if it were a compliment rather than the backhanded insult it was. What I mean to say, he continued, reaching for her hand, which she reluctantly allowed him to take, is that I believe we could form a most advantageous partnership. My position and prospects combined with your domestic capabilities would create a stable and proper household. With this in mind, I would like to formally court you with a view toward marriage by year's end. He delivered the proposal with all the passion of a man discussing a business merger, which Lily realized was precisely what he considered it to be. Mr. Stevenson, she began carefully, I'm flattered by your proposal. His smile widened, clearly taking her response as acceptance. Excellent. I've already spoken with your aunt, who has given her blessing. We can announce our courtship at tomorrow's celebration, and Mr. Stevenson, Lily interrupted, gently withdrawing her hand from his. I haven't actually accepted. His expression shifted from satisfaction to confusion. I don't understand. This arrangement solves your difficulties completely. Your aunt has made it clear that her home is not a permanent solution for you, and without family or fortune, your options are limited. The blunt assessment of her situation stung, not least because it contained more than a grain of truth. But as Lily stood there, facing a future mapped out by others with no regard for her own heart, she felt a newfound clarity. My options may indeed be limited, she acknowledged, but they are still mine to choose from, and while I appreciate your practical assessment of our potential match, I must decline your offer. Walter stared at her, genuine bewilderment replacing his usual self-assurance. Decline? But why would you possibly? He trailed off, seemingly unable to comprehend her refusal. Because I believe marriage should be built on more than convenience and pragmatism, Lily said, her voice growing stronger with each word. It should be a partnership of equals who genuinely admire and respect one another, who see each other's true worth, not just their utility. That's a rather romantic notion, Walter replied, his tone suggesting this was not a compliment. Practical considerations are what sustain a marriage long after initial sentiments have faded. Perhaps, Lily conceded. But I would prefer to start with those sentiments at least, rather than bypassing them altogether. Walter's expression hardened. Is there someone else? I was given to understand that you had formed no attachments in Los Animas. An image of Sam Dixon flashed in Lily's mind, his kind eyes, his easy smile, the way he had looked at her as if really seeing her. But she pushed it aside. This decision wasn't about Sam, it was about her own dignity and worth. There is no one else, Mr. Stevenson. There is only my own heart, which I find I cannot ignore, even when practicality might dictate otherwise. Walter's jaw tightened. Your aunt will be most displeased. I have no doubt, Lily agreed, already dreading the confrontation to come. But I cannot accept a proposal simply to avoid her displeasure. You may come to regret this decision, Miss Adams, Walter said stiffly. Los Animas offers few opportunities for a woman in your particular circumstances. That may be so, Lily replied, lifting her chin slightly. But I would regret accepting your offer far more. You deserve a wife who genuinely admires you, Mr. Stevenson, and I deserve a husband who sees me as more than a substantial addition to his orderly life. Walter flinched at having his own word turned back on him. I see. Well, if your mind is made up, there is little point in continuing this conversation. Shall we rejoin the others? The return to the parlor was awkward, with Walter's stiff posture and Lily's flushed cheeks immediately telegraphing the outcome of their private discussion. Aunt Harriet's expression darkened dangerously, while Mrs. Stevenson's smile became brittle. The evening ended shortly thereafter, with clipped goodbyes and promises to see each other at tomorrow's celebration that now rang hollow. The walk home with Aunt Harriet was conducted in frigid silence until they were safely behind the closed door of her modest home. Have you taken complete leave of your senses? Aunt Harriet demanded the moment they were alone. Do you have any idea what you've thrown away? Walter Stevenson is the most eligible bachelor in Los Animas. I'm well aware of his eligibility, Lily replied, removing her hat and gloves with deliberate calm. But I cannot marry a man who sees me as a convenient acquisition rather than a person worthy of genuine affection. Affection. Her aunt scoffed. What has affection to do with securing your future? Walter Stevenson offered you respectability, financial security, and a position in society that you could never achieve on your own, especially not with your figure. The familiar criticism barely stung now. My figure is my own, Aunt Harriet, as is my future. I am grateful for your shelter these past months, but I cannot allow gratitude to dictate the rest of my life. And what do you propose to do instead? Her aunt demanded. Your inheritance is nearly gone. You have no skills that would earn a respectable living. Where will you go? What will you do? For the first time, Lily had no ready answer. She had been so focused on what she didn't want that she had given little thought to what might come next. But even that uncertainty seemed preferable to the suffocating future Walter Stevenson had offered. I don't know yet, she admitted, but I will find my way. Aunt Harriet shook her head, her expression a mixture of anger and genuine bewilderment. I have tried to help you, Lily. Despite the burden your presence has placed on my household, I have tried to secure you a respectable future. And this is how you repay me, with romantic nonsense about affection and feelings. I'm sorry you see it that way, Lily said quietly. I truly am grateful for your help, even if we disagree on what my future should look like. Well, her aunt said coldly, you have made your choice. But do not expect me to support you indefinitely while you wait for some imaginary suitor who will overlook your shortcomings for the sake of affection. If you cannot be sensible about your prospects, then perhaps it is time you made your own way in the world. The words hung in the air between them, their meaning clear. Lily's refusal of Walter Stevenson had cost her not just a potential husband but her only home as well. I understand, Lily said, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. I'll make arrangements to leave after the Founders' Day celebration. See that you do, Aunt Harriet replied, then turned and swept up the stairs to her bedroom, leaving Lily alone in the entryway, facing a future suddenly as vast and uncertain as the western horizon. Founders' Day dawned bright and clear, the June sun promising heat later but currently casting a gentle golden light over Los Animas as the town prepared for its annual celebration. Bunting in red, white, and blue adorned the main street buildings, and a temporary platform had been erected in the town square for speeches and presentations. Lily stood before the mirror in her room, examining her reflection in the remade blue dress. Mabel had done wonders with it, creating a garment that followed Lily's natural curves instead of fighting them. The contrasting fabrics added visual interest while providing the needed room, and the overall effect was elegant rather than constraining. For perhaps the first time since coming to Los Animas, Lily felt comfortable in her own skin. The knowledge that she would soon need to leave that by tomorrow, she would need to have a plan for her future weighed heavily on her mind, but she was determined to enjoy this one day of freedom before facing those hard decisions. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Lily. Aunt Harriet's voice called, "Are you ready? We're expected at the square in 30 minutes. Coming, Aunt Harriet," Lily replied, giving her reflection one last appraising look before turning away. Her aunt was waiting at the foot of the stairs, her own dress a severe black despite the festive occasion a lingering nod to her widowhood, though her husband had been gone for nearly 5 years. Her eyes widened slightly as Lily descended, the blue dress flowing gracefully around her. "Well," she said, her tone suggesting grudging approval, "at least you look presentable." Mabel Green did what she could with the material available. Lily accepted the backhanded compliment with a nod. Yes, she's very talented. The Stevensons will be at the celebration, of course, Aunt Harriet continued as they made their way out the door and down the street toward the town square. I expect you to be civil, despite the awkwardness of the situation you've created. Of course, Lily agreed. She had no desire to create a scene or to hurt Walter further, regardless of how misguided his proposal had been. The town square was already crowded when they arrived, with families spreading blankets on the grass and vendors setting up stalls selling everything from lemonade to hand-carved toys. Children ran laughing between groups of adults, their excitement for the day's festivities palpable in the air. Aunt Harriet immediately steered them toward a group of the town's more prominent citizens, including the mayor and his wife. Lily followed dutifully, nodding and smiling at the appropriate moments as introductions were made, all while scanning the crowd. She told herself she wasn't looking for Sam Dixon, who was miles away on a delivery run to Pueblo. And yet her eyes kept searching, as if some part of her refused to believe he wouldn't be there. The formal part of the celebration began with speeches from the mayor and other town officials, recounting the founding of Las Animas and its growth over the years. Lily half listened, her mind wandering to her uncertain future. She had some money saved, not much, but perhaps enough to take her to Denver or even Kansas City, where she might find work of some kind. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. After the speeches came a community picnic, with tables groaning under the weight of dishes brought by nearly every household in town. Lily found herself separated from her aunt as they moved through the food line, which suited her fine. The less time spent under Aunt Harriet's disapproving gaze, the better. With a plate of food in hand, Lily looked for a quiet spot away from the main crowd. She found a shady area beneath a large cottonwood tree at the edge of the square and settled there, spreading her skirts carefully around her. She was halfway through her meal when a shadow fell across her plate. Looking up, she expected to see her aunt come to chide her for sitting alone. Instead, she found Walter Stevenson standing stiffly before her, his expression carefully neutral. "Miss Adams," he greeted her formally. "May I join you for a moment?" Surprised but unwilling to be rude, Lily nodded. "Of course, Mr. Stevenson." He sat beside her with precise movements, maintaining a proper distance between them. For a moment neither spoke, the awkwardness of their last encounter hanging heavily in the air. "I feel I owe you an apology," Walter finally said, his words so unexpected that Lily nearly dropped her fork. "An apology?" she echoed, unsure she had heard correctly. Walter nodded, his usual self-assurance momentarily absent. "After reflecting on our conversation last evening, I realized that my proposal may have been somewhat lacking in sentiment. My father has always emphasized practical considerations in all matters, including marriage, and I fear I have perhaps internalized that perspective to an excessive degree." Lily studied him, seeing for the first time a glimpse of vulnerability beneath the banker's sun exterior. "That's very self-aware of you to recognize, Mr. Stevenson. Yes, well," he straightened his already immaculate waistcoat. "Self-improvement is a continuous process. In any case, I wish to ensure that there were no lingering unpleasantries between us. Las Animas is a small town, after all." "I appreciate that," Lily said sincerely, "and please know that I never meant to cause offense. I simply believe that marriage should begin with mutual affection and respect." "A reasonable position," Walter conceded, though perhaps somewhat idealistic in a frontier town where practical alliances often take precedence. Before Lily could respond, a commotion near the edge of the square caught their attention. A wagon was pulling in at speed, the driver urging the horses forward with more haste than was typical for the normally sedate celebration. Lily's heart leaped when she recognized Sam Dixon at the reins, his expression tense as he pulled the team to a halt near the mayor's platform. He jumped down from the wagon with more agility than she would have expected from a man with a healing leg injury, and made his way quickly to where the town officials were gathered. "I wonder what that's about," Walter mused, watching as Sam engaged in what appeared to be an urgent conversation with the mayor and sheriff. "I'm not sure," Lily replied, her eyes fixed on Sam's serious expression. "But he was supposed to be in Pueblo today. Something must have happened to bring him back early." Walter gave her a curious look. "You seem well informed about Mr. Dixon's schedule." Lily felt heat rise to her cheeks. "We've spoken a few times. He made deliveries to my aunt's house." Before Walter could respond, the mayor stepped up onto the platform, raising his hands for attention. The festive crowd gradually quieted, sensing that something important was about to be announced. "Ladies and gentlemen," the mayor called out, his voice carrying across the square. "I've just received word from Mr. Dixon, who was on his way to Pueblo this morning, that a grass fire has broken out along the East Ridge. The wind is pushing it toward town, and we need to organize immediately to create fire breaks and protect our homes." A murmur of alarm swept through the crowd. Grass fires were a known danger in the dry summer months, but one threatening the town itself was cause for serious concern. "Sheriff Taylor will organize the men into teams," the mayor continued. "Women and children should return home and prepare for possible evacuation if the fire cannot be contained. Gather only essential belongings that can be quickly transported." The ordered celebration dissolved into controlled chaos as families gathered their belongings and men stepped forward to volunteer for the firefighting effort. Lily rose quickly, searching the crowd for her aunt. "I should find my aunt," she said to Walter, who had also stood. "Of course." He nodded. "I must join the firefighting efforts. Miss Adams," he hesitated. "Please be careful." "You as well, Mr. Stevenson," she replied, genuinely concerned for his safety. As Walter moved away to join the men gathering around the sheriff, Lily continued scanning the crowd for Aunt Harriet. Instead, she found herself face to face with Sam Dixon, who seemed to have been making his way toward her. "Lily," he said, foregoing formality in the midst of the emergency, "are you all right?" "Yes," she assured him, "but I need to find my aunt. Last I saw her, she was with Mrs. Peterson heading toward your home," Sam informed her. "I came to make sure you were safe before joining the firefighting teams." Relief flooded through Lily. "Thank you, I'll head home now." She paused, suddenly anxious. "The fire, how bad is it?" Sam's expression was grim. "Bad enough. The wind's pushing it this way, and everything's bone dry from the heat. If we can't get fire breaks in place quick, the town could be in real danger." The reality of the situation hit Lily fully for the first time. Las Animas and her aunt's home could be destroyed. And while she had been planning to leave anyway, the thought of losing everything to fire was terrifying. "Be careful," she said, impulsively reaching out to touch his arm. "Please." Something flickered in Sam's eyes, warmth and something deeper that made her breath catch. "I will, you too. Get what's important and be ready to leave if the order comes." With that, he was gone, striding toward the group of men now loading tools and water barrels onto wagons. Lily watched him for a moment, then turned and hurried toward her aunt's house, lifting her skirts to move faster. By the time she reached the modest white clapboard house, Aunt Harriet was already inside, directing the housekeeper with uncharacteristic urgency. "There you are," she said when Lily entered. "Quick, gather your most essential belongings. One bag only, we may need to evacuate at a moment's notice." Lily hurried to her room, her mind racing as she tried to decide what was truly essential. Her father's pocket watch, certainly, the small wooden box he had carved for her mother's wedding ring, a change of clothes, the book of poetry her mother had loved. Her meager savings, carefully hidden in the lining of her winter boots. As she packed, she moved to the window, looking eastward. A dark smudge of smoke was visible on the horizon now, closer than she'd expected. The sky above it was turning an ominous orange-gray, and the wind that blew through her open window carried the acrid smell of burning grass. The next few hours passed in tense waiting. Aunt Harriet paced the parlor, occasionally stepping onto the porch to check the progress of the fire. Reports filtered in from neighbors and passing riders. The men were working to create fire breaks by clearing brush and digging trenches, but the fire was moving fast, driven by the hot summer wind. By late afternoon, the smoke had thickened noticeably, and ash began to fall like gray snow on the streets of Las Animas. The air grew increasingly difficult to breathe, and Lily found herself coughing despite the damp cloth Aunt Harriet had instructed her to hold over her nose and mouth. "We should leave now," Aunt Harriet declared as the sky darkened further, "before the roads become impassable." "But the evacuation order hasn't come yet," Lily pointed out. "And where would we go?" West, away from the fire, her aunt replied firmly. The Petersons have already left for their daughter's farm near La Junta. We can follow them. Before Lily could respond, a pounding came at the front door. Aunt Harriet opened it to reveal one of the young boys who worked at the livery, his face streaked with soot. "Sheriff says everyone needs to evacuate now, madam," he gasped. "Fires jumped the first fire break. They're trying to hold it at the creek, but it ain't looking good." "Thank you, boy," Aunt Harriet said, pressing a coin into his hand. "Run along and warn the others." As the boy dashed off to continue his rounds, Aunt Harriet turned to Lily with an expression that brooked no argument. "Get your bag, we're leaving immediately." Lily hurried to her room, grabbing the small carpet bag she had packed earlier. As she was about to leave, she paused, looking at the blue dress she had carefully hung up after changing into more practical clothes for the potential evacuation. On impulse, she stuffed it into her bag as well. It barely fit, making the bag bulge awkwardly, but something in her couldn't bear to leave it behind. They stepped out onto the porch to find the street filled with people and wagons, all heading west away from the approaching fire. The air was now thick with smoke, making it difficult to see more than a block ahead. "We'll need to walk until we can find transportation," Aunt Harriet said grimly, her own small bag clutched tightly in her gloved hand. "Stay close to me." They joined the flow of evacuees, moving slowly westward through the haze of smoke. Lily's eyes stung, and her throat felt raw from coughing. All around them, people called out for family members, children cried, and livestock balked at being led through the smoke-filled streets. They had gone perhaps 3 blocks when Lily heard her name being called. Turning, she saw Sam Dixon approaching on horseback, leading a second mount behind him. "Lily," he called again, pulling alongside them. His face was blackened with soot, and his clothes showed signs of hard work fighting the fire. "Mrs. Fletcher, you need to get out of town now. The fire's moving faster than we thought." "We're trying, Mr. Dixon," Aunt Harriet replied tersely. "As you can see, we're rather limited without transportation." Sam nodded, dismounting quickly. "That's why I'm here. Take these horses. They'll get you to safety faster than walking." Aunt Harriet stared at the offered reins, clearly torn between necessity and her disapproval of accepting help from someone she considered beneath her station. "We couldn't possibly," she began. "Thank you," Lily interrupted, taking the reins of one horse before her aunt could complete her refusal. "But what about you?" "I'm headed back to help with the firefighting," Sam explained, helping Aunt Harriet, who had apparently decided that survival outweighed propriety, onto the second horse. "We're making a last stand at the creek, but everyone needs to be clear of town just in case." Lily mounted her horse, adjusting her skirts as best she could for riding astride something her aunt would normally never allow. "Be careful, Sam, please." He looked up at her, his expression softening despite the urgency of the situation. "Always am. Head west until you reach the Henderson Ranch. They're taking in evacuees." With a final nod, he turned and began jogging back toward the eastern edge of town, where the glow of the approaching fire was now clearly visible against the darkening sky. "Come, Lily," Aunt Harriet called, already urging her horse forward. "We must go." Lily hesitated only a moment before following, her heart torn between the need for safety and her concern for the man who had once again appeared when she needed him most. The Henderson Ranch was crowded with evacuees from Las Animas, families huddled in the barn and bunkhouse while ranch hands distributed food and blankets. Mrs. Henderson, a practical woman in her 50s, moved through the groups with calm efficiency, ensuring everyone had what they needed. Lily and Aunt Harriet were given space in the main house, a courtesy extended due to Aunt Harriet standing in town rather than any particular friendship with the Hendersons. From the parlor window, Lily could see the distant glow of the fire against the night sky, a red-orange smudge that seemed to pulse with malevolent life. "Do you think they'll be able to stop it?" she asked quietly as Aunt Harriet joined her at the window. "One can only pray," her aunt replied, her usual sharpness momentarily absent. "If not, we may all be starting over elsewhere." The thought hung between them, heavy with implications. For Aunt Harriet, it would mean the loss of her home and position in Los Animas society. For Lily, whose plans to leave had been accelerated rather than created by the fire, it meant an even more uncertain future. That was. "Considerate of Mr. Dixon to bring us horses," Aunt Harriet said after a long silence, the admission clearly difficult for her. "Yes," Lily agreed simply. "It was. You seem quite familiar with him." It wasn't quite an accusation, but the implication was clear. Lily turned to face her aunt directly. "We've spoken several times. He's a kind man, honorable." Aunt Harriet's expression tightened. "He's a delivery man, Lily. With no prospects, no property, and apparently a permanent injury. Hardly suitable company for a young woman of your background, reduced as our circumstances may be." The familiar criticism sparked something in Lily, not the usual shame or resignation, but a quiet, steady certainty. "My father was a carpenter, Aunt Harriet, a craftsman who worked with his hands just as Sam Dixon does. There's no shame in honest work." "Your father was an artist," her aunt corrected stiffly. "And even so, your mother married beneath her station, as my brother never tired of reminding me." "I had hoped you might aim higher. Like Walter Stevenson?" Lily asked quietly. "Yes, like Walter Stevenson, a man with a future with stability to offer." "A man who sees me as substantial rather than beautiful," Lily countered, "who values me for my potential utility rather than for myself." Aunt Harriet sighed, suddenly looking older in the dim lamplight. "Beauty fades, Lily. Practicality endures. Your romantic notions about love and affection won't keep a roof over your head or food on your table." "Perhaps not," Lily conceded. "But they might keep my spirit alive while I find other ways to manage those practical concerns." Before her aunt could respond, a commotion outside drew their attention. Looking out the window, Lily saw riders approaching at speed, their figures silhouetted against the fiery glow on the horizon. Without thinking, she hurried outside, ignoring Aunt Harriet's call to come back. On the porch of the ranch house, she strained to see the approaching riders, her heart pounding with worry and hope. The lead rider pulled up in the yard, calling out to the gathered evacuees. "The fire's been contained at the creek. Los Animas is safe." A cheer went up from the crowd, people embracing and thanking God for the reprieve. Lily scanned the group of soot-blackened men dismounting in the yard, searching for one familiar figure. She finally spotted Sam at the edge of the group, leaning heavily against his horse. Without hesitation, she hurried down the porch steps and across the yard toward him. "Sam," she called, drawing his attention. He looked up, exhaustion etched in every line of his face, but smiled when he saw her. "Lily, you made it here all right then." "Yes, thanks to you," she reached him, noticing how he favored his left leg. "You're hurt." "It's nothing," he insisted. "Old injury acting up after too many hours digging trenches. The fire's out or contained at least. Town's safe." Relief flooded through Lily. "Thank goodness. When can people return?" "Sheriff says tomorrow morning, once they're sure all the hot spots are dealt with." Sam straightened, wincing slightly. "Your aunt's house is fine. It never got close enough to damage any buildings." "I'm glad," Lily said, though the news brought mixed emotions. Her aunt's house being intact meant her departure would proceed as planned. But where would she go? What would she do? "You don't look as relieved as I'd expect," Sam observed, his eyes studying her face with surprising perception despite his exhaustion. Lily hesitated, then decided on honesty. "I was planning to leave Los Animas anyway. My aunt and we had a disagreement. About Walter Stevenson." Sam guessed, his expression carefully neutral. "You heard about that," he shrugged. "Small town, word gets around," he paused. "So where will you go?" "I'm not sure yet," Lily admitted. "Denver, perhaps, or Kansas City, somewhere I can find work and start fresh." Sam was quiet for a moment, seeming to consider something. "I might have another option for you to consider," he finally said. "If you're interested." Before he could continue, Mrs. Henderson approached, insisting that the firefighters come inside for food and rest. The moment was lost as Sam was led away, looking back at Lily with a promise in his eyes to continue their conversation later. Returning to the house, Lily found Aunt Harriet waiting in the parlor, her expression troubled. "Was that Mr. Dixon you were speaking with?" Yes, Lily answered honestly. He was injured fighting the fire, but he says the town is safe. We can return tomorrow. Her aunt nodded, seeming distracted. Lily, about our conversation earlier and indeed about our disagreement regarding Walter Stevenson. She paused, clearly struggling with what she wanted to say. Yes, Aunt Harriet, Lily prompted gently. I may have been overly harsh in my assessment of your situation and your choices, her aunt said stiffly. The fire has reminded me that there are more important things than social standing or financial security. My sister-in-law, your mother, chose love over practicality, and while I did not understand her decision at the time, she never seemed to regret it. Lily stared at her aunt, astonished by this unexpected softening. Thank you for saying that. However, Aunt Harriet continued, her tone firming again, that doesn't mean I approve of any attachment to someone like Mr. Dixon. There is a middle ground between a loveless match and throwing away all prospects for security. I understand, Lily said, though in truth, she was no longer certain she cared about her aunt's approval. The fire had changed something in her, as well a reminder of how quickly life could be upended, and how precious it was to follow one's heart while there was still time. The evacuees spent an uncomfortable night at the Henderson Ranch, most sleeping on makeshift pallets in the barn and bunkhouse. Lily and her aunt were given beds in the guest room, but Lily found sleep elusive, her mind filled with thoughts of Sam Dixon and his mysterious option for her to consider. Morning brought clear skies and news that it was safe to return to Los Animas. The fire had been fully contained, though crews remained to monitor hotspots. The town itself was untouched, protected by the creek and the fire breaks the men had labored to create. As Lily and Aunt Harriet prepared to leave, Lily searched for Sam among the departing firefighters, but he was nowhere to be found. Mrs. Henderson informed her that some men had left before dawn to continue monitoring the fire line, and Lily suspected Sam had been among them. The ride back to town was solemn, the landscape to the east blackened and smoking where the fire had passed. Los Animas itself was coated in a fine layer of ash, but otherwise appeared eerily normal, as if the previous day's panic had been merely a bad dream. Aunt Harriet's house was exactly as they had left it, their hasty departure evident in small details, a chair askew, a book left open on a table. The familiar space felt different to Lily now, transitional rather than oppressive, a temporary stop on a journey whose destination remained unclear. I'll be leaving tomorrow, she informed her aunt as they unpacked their small bags. I have enough saved for a stagecoach ticket to Denver. Aunt Harriet looked up sharply. So soon, surely there's no need to rush. After the excitement of the fire, perhaps we both need time to reconsider our positions. Lily shook her head gently but firmly. My mind is made up, Aunt Harriet. I'm grateful for your shelter these past months, but it's time I made my own way. Her aunt seemed about to argue further when a knock came at the front door. The housekeeper answered it, then appeared at the parlor doorway. Miss Adams, there's a Mr. Dixon here to see you, she announced, her tone suggesting she found the visit highly irregular. Aunt Harriet's lips thinned, but to Lily's surprise, she didn't object. Show him in, Martha. But leave the door open. Sam entered a moment later, hat in hand. He had cleaned up since Lily had last seen him, though his clothes still bore traces of soot and his eyes were shadowed with fatigue. He nodded respectfully to Aunt Harriet before turning to Lily. Miss Adams, Mrs. Fletcher. I hope I'm not intruding. Not at all, Mr. Dixon, Lily replied before her aunt could speak. We were just getting settled after returning to town. I'm glad to hear your home was unharmed, Sam said to Aunt Harriet, who acknowledged the sentiment with a tight nod. Thank you for your assistance during the evacuation, she said formally. It was most appreciated. Happy to help, madam, he turned back to Lily. I wondered if I might speak with you, Miss Adams, about what we discussed last night. Aunt Harriet raised an eyebrow, but remarkably didn't immediately object. I suppose I could give you a few moments of privacy. Martha will be just down the hall, of course. With that surprisingly gracious concession, she left the room, though Lily noticed she didn't go far, just to the dining room across the hall, where she busied herself straightening items on the sideboard while maintaining a clear line of sight. Once they were nominally alone, Sam stepped closer to Lily, his expression earnest. "I heard you're planning to leave for Denver tomorrow." "Yes," Lily confirmed. "It seems the best option for a fresh start." Sam nodded, his gaze direct. "Before you decide for certain, I wanted to tell you about another possibility. You mentioned your father was a carpenter." "Yes, he taught me a great deal about woodworking before he passed," Lily replied, uncertain where this was leading. "I've been saving to buy the old Miller property at the edge of town," Sam explained. "It's got a small house and a workshop that used to be a furniture maker's place. I've been planning to set up a carpentry and repair business there, but I know more about fixing wagons than making fine furniture." Lily's heart began to beat faster, sensing where this conversation might be heading. "I'm proposing a partnership," Sam continued. "I've got the property almost paid for, but I could use someone with real skill for the finer woodwork. Someone like you. A partnership." Lily repeated, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "You want me to work with you making furniture, not just work with me," Sam clarified, his eyes never leaving hers. "Be my partner, equal shares in the business. Your skill with the finer pieces, my knowledge of repairs and larger items. Together, I think we could build something worthwhile." "But you barely know me," Lily protested weakly. "You've never even seen my work." "I know enough," Sam replied simply. "I know you're smart and determined. I know you're willing to stand up for yourself, even when it costs you. And I know that when you look at me, you see a man, not just a delivery boy with a bad leg." The directness of his assessment took Lily's breath away. "And what would people say, a man and woman in business together, unmarried?" A smile tugged at the corner of Sam's mouth. "Well, there's a simple solution to that particular problem if you were interested, but I reckon we should start with the business partnership and see where things go from there." The implication hung in the air between them, both acknowledged and carefully set aside for the moment. "This is unexpected," Lily said finally, her mind racing with possibilities. A chance to use the skills her father had taught her to build something of her own instead of fitting herself into someone else's expectations. "Take some time to think about it," Sam suggested. "I know it's sudden. But I wanted you to know there are options here in Los Animas if you wanted to stay." If you wanted to stay with me remained unspoken, but Lily heard it clearly nonetheless. "I will think about it," she promised. Very seriously, Sam nodded, seemingly satisfied. "That's all I ask." He glanced toward the dining room where Aunt Harriet was making a poor show of not eavesdropping. "I should go. You know where to find me if you want to discuss this further." He placed his hat back on his head, tipped it slightly to Lily, and headed for the door. At the threshold, he paused and looked back. "Whatever you decide, Lily Adams, don't change a thing about yourself. Not for Denver, not for Los Animas, and certainly not for me. You're perfectly fine just as you are." With that, he was gone, leaving Lily standing in the parlor with her heart pounding and her mind full of new possibilities. Aunt Harriet re-entered the room moments after Sam's departure, her expression a mixture of curiosity and concern. What did Mr. Dixon want? Lily considered deflecting but decided on honesty. "He offered me a business partnership. He's buying a property with a workshop and wants me to join him in making and repairing furniture." Her aunt's eyebrows rose nearly to her hairline. "A business partnership with an unmarried man." "Lily, surely you can see how inappropriate that would be." "Times are changing, Aunt Harriet," Lily replied quietly. "Women are finding new paths, especially out here in the West." "Perhaps in Denver or San Francisco," her aunt conceded reluctantly. "But Los Animas is a traditional community. Your reputation would be ruined." "Unless we eventually married," Lily said, testing the words and finding they felt right on her tongue. Aunt Harriet stared at her. "Is that what this is about? Has Mr. Dixon proposed marriage as well as business?" "Not exactly," Lily admitted. "He suggested we start with the business and see where things go." To Lily's surprise, Aunt Harriet didn't immediately dismiss the idea with scorn. Instead, she sank into a nearby chair, her expression thoughtful. "Lily, you know I want what's best for you," she said after a moment. "I may not always express it well, but that has been my intention all along." Walter Stevenson could offer you security and respectability. Samuel Dixon offers you, what? Hard work and uncertainty. He offers me partnership, Lily replied. The chance to use the skills my father taught me. And yes, perhaps eventually something more. You barely know the man. I know enough, Lily echoed Sam's words from earlier. I know he sees me as I am and values me for it, not despite it. Aunt Harriet sighed, looking suddenly tired. The fire has reminded me how precarious life can be, Lily. I lost your uncle without warning, just as you lost your parents. I've been trying to shield you from that kind of uncertainty, but perhaps in doing so, I've pushed you toward a future that would have made you unhappy. I know you meant well, Lily said softly, moved by this rare moment of vulnerability from her usually rigid aunt. That said, Aunt Harriet continued, straightening her spine, if you're determined to accept Mr. Dixon's unusual proposal, I would insist on certain conditions to preserve your reputation and standing in the community. Lily bit back a smile at her aunt's predictable pivot back to propriety. What conditions did you have in mind? First, a formal business agreement drawn up by a lawyer. Second, if you are to work together, it must be in a public setting with appropriate chaperoning until such time as your relationship progresses to an official courtship or engagement. And third, you would continue to reside here under my roof until any such engagement became official. The offer took Lily completely by surprise. She had expected resistance, even an ultimatum not grudging acceptance with reasonable conditions. You'd let me stay, she asked, hardly believing what she was hearing. Even if I go into business with Sam. Better that than having you run off to Denver alone, Aunt Harriet replied practically. At least here I can keep an eye on you and ensure things remain proper, and if Mr. Dixon's intentions prove honorable, as you seem to believe they are. She trailed off with a small shrug. Lily impulsively crossed the room and embraced her aunt, an unprecedented display of affection that left the older woman stiff with surprise before she awkwardly patted Lily's back. Thank you, Aunt Harriet, Lily said, drawing back. Truly? Yes, well. Her aunt smoothed her skirts, clearly uncomfortable with the emotional moment. Don't thank me yet. I still think Walter Stevenson would have been a more sensible choice. Lily laughed, feeling lighter than she had in months. I know you do. But sometimes the heart has reasons that reason knows nothing of. Pascal, Aunt Harriet identified the quote with a raised eyebrow. Your mother was fond of that line as well when she announced her intention to marry your father despite my brother's objections. And were they happy? Lily asked, genuinely curious. Her mother had rarely spoken of her own family's reaction to her marriage. Aunt Harriet's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Disgustingly so. Even when they had nothing, they always seemed to find joy in each other. It was most vexing for those of us who had made more practical matches. With that surprising admission, Aunt Harriet rose and announced her intention to rest after the excitement of the past day, leaving Lily alone with her thoughts and a decision to make. The next morning, Lily stood outside the livery stable, her heart pounding as she gathered her courage. She had spent a restless night weighing her options, though in her heart, she had known her decision almost from the moment Sam had made his proposal. She found him in the back of the stable, repairing a wagon wheel with methodical precision. He looked up as she approached, his hands stilling on his work. Miss Adams, he greeted her, a question in his eyes. Didn't expect to see you today, thought you might be on the morning stage to Denver. I've decided to postpone that journey, Lily replied, a smile tugging at her lips. I've had a better offer here in Los Animas. Sam set his tools aside, giving her his full attention. Have you now anything I might be interested in hearing about? A business partnership, she said, stepping closer. With a man who sees value in skills most people would consider unsuitable for a woman, it's a risk, of course. The business might fail, the townspeople might gossip, my aunt might never fully approve. Sounds complicated, Sam observed, though his eyes had brightened with hope. What made you decide to accept such a risky proposition? The man making the offer, Lily answered honestly. He told me not to change a thing about myself, which is the first time anyone in Los Animas has suggested I might be acceptable exactly as I am. Sam stood, closing the distance between them until they were standing just a proper hand's breadth apart. Smart man. I think so, Lily agreed. Though his judgment might be questioned by some, given that he's proposing a business partnership with a woman he's only just met. He knows what he sees, Sam said softly, and he likes what he sees very much. The moment stretched between them, full of possibility and promise. Then Sam cleared his throat, taking a small step back. I should show you the property, he suggested. If we're going to be partners, you should see what you're getting into. Lily nodded. My aunt insists on a formal business agreement, by the way, and continued chaperoning until. Well, until circumstances might change. Sam's lips quirked in a smile. Sensible precautions, I'd expect nothing less from Mrs. Fletcher. He offered his arm in a gentlemanly gesture. Shall we go see our future workshop? Lily placed her hand on his arm, feeling as if she were stepping not just toward a building, but toward a future filled with possibilities she had never dared to imagine. I'd like that very much. The Miller property sat at the eastern edge of Las Animas, a modest homestead with a small house and a larger workshop building behind it. The land around it showed signs of the recent fire, blackened grass and scorched fence posts, but the buildings themselves were untouched, protected by the creek that curved around the property. Fire came right up to the creek line, Sam explained as he showed Lily around the workshop. But it held. Seems like a good omen, don't you think? Place standing strong against the odds. The workshop itself was spacious and well lit, with high windows that let in abundant natural light. Dust covered most surfaces and cobwebs hung in the corners, but Lily could see the potential immediately. Mr. Miller was known for his rocking chairs, Sam told her, gesturing to a half-finished piece in one corner. He passed 2 years ago and his children moved to Denver. Place has been sitting empty since then. Lily ran her hand along a workbench, feeling the smooth wood worn by years of craftsmanship. My father would have loved this space. Think you could do good work here? Sam asked, watching her carefully. Yes, Lily replied without hesitation. With the right tools and materials, I could create pieces my father would have been proud of. That settles it then. Sam grinned. I've got most of the purchase money saved. Another month or 2 of deliveries should cover the rest, then we can start fixing the place up proper. As they continued their tour, Lily could almost see the future taking shape around them, the workshop cleaned and organized, new pieces of furniture taking form under their hands. A business built on mutual respect and shared passion for craftsmanship. The house needs work, Sam admitted as they approached the small structure. Roof's sound, but the inside's been neglected. I figured I'd fix it up bit by bit while living in town. Lily peered through a dusty window at the compact interior, just 2 rooms and a kitchen area, simply built but sturdy. It has good bones, she observed. Like the workshop. Sam glanced at her, something warm in his gaze. Was thinking the same about the whole property. Good bones, just needs someone to see the potential and be willing to put in the work. The double meaning wasn't lost on Lily. Some might say it's not worth the effort, that starting fresh somewhere else would be easier. Some people don't appreciate the value of things that have been around a while, Sam replied, his eyes never leaving hers. They want everything new and fashionable, even if it's not built to last. Like dresses that look pretty but don't let you breathe, Lily suggested with a small smile. Sam laughed, the sound rich and genuine in the quiet of the abandoned homestead. Exactly like that. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, the future stretching before them, uncertain, challenging, but full of possibility. We should head back, Sam finally said, glancing at the sun's position. Your aunt will be wondering where you are, and I've got deliveries to complete before sundown. As they walked back toward town, Lily's mind was already racing with planned sketches she wanted to draw, pieces she could create, ways to organize the workshop for maximum efficiency. For the first time since her father's death, she felt a sense of purpose, of moving toward something rather than simply away from loss. You're quiet, Sam observed as they neared the edge of town. Having second thoughts, not at all, Lily assured him, just making plans. Thinking about the future. Good plans, I hope, the best, she confirmed. A future built on my own terms, using the skills my father taught me, and shared with someone who values those skills and me exactly as we are. Sam's expression softened. That sounds like a future worth working toward. As they parted ways at the edge of town, Lily to return to her aunt's house, and Sam to complete his deliveries, Lily felt a sense of rightness, of pieces falling into place in a pattern more beautiful than anything she could have designed herself. Her father had always said that the grain of the wood told you where to cut, if only you had the patience to listen. Perhaps life was the same way. The path forward might not be the one her aunt had envisioned for her, or even the one she had imagined for herself in the aftermath of loss. But it was a path that honored both who she was and who she might become, curves, skills, dreams, and all. The next few months passed in a whirlwind of activity. True to his word, Sam completed the purchase of the Miller property by the end of summer. With Aunt Harriet's reluctant blessing and frequent chaperoning, Lily began spending her days at the workshop, cleaning, organizing, and preparing for the business to open. Word spread quickly through Los Animas about the unusual partnership, causing predictable gossip and speculation. Some, like Walter Stevenson, viewed the enterprise with skepticism bordering on disdain. Others, particularly those who had known and respected Lily's father, expressed cautious support. "People will talk regardless of what we do," Lily told Sam one afternoon as they worked side by side, restoring the workshop to working order. "Better to give them something worth talking about." Sam laughed, pausing in his task of hanging newly sharpened tools on the wall rack he had built. "You've changed since that day at Mabel's shop, grown more confident." "Not changed," Lily corrected him with a smile. "Just become more myself. You told me not to change a thing, remember?" "I remember," Sam confirmed, his eyes warm as they met hers across the workbench. By October, Dixon and Adams' Fine Furniture and Repairs was ready to open for business. Lily had created several small showcase pieces, a jewelry box, a set of carved candlesticks, and a delicate side table to demonstrate her skills, while Sam had prepared to handle repairs and larger commissions. The grand opening, such as it was, drew a modest crowd of curious townspeople. Aunt Harriet attended, her presence a silent but powerful endorsement that helped quiet some of the more judgmental whispers. Even Walter Stevenson made an appearance, examining Lily's work with grudging appreciation before placing an order for a writing desk for his office at the bank. "Substantial craftsmanship," he commented to Lily as he wrote out the details of his commission. "Quite impressive for a lady woodworker." Lily accepted the backhanded compliment with grace, recognizing the effort it took for Walter to acknowledge her skill. "Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. I learned from the best." As the business slowly grew, so too did Lily's relationship with Sam. Their partnership in work evolved naturally into a courtship, conducted with proper decorum under Aunt Harriet's watchful eye, but deepening nonetheless into something neither had expected to find in Los Animas. By Christmas, with snow dusting the repaired roof of the workshop and orders coming in steadily from town and surrounding ranches, Sam formally asked for Lily's hand in marriage. The proposal came not in a grand gesture, but in a quiet moment as they finished work one evening, lamplight casting a warm glow over the workshop they had built together. "Been thinking," Sam said as Lily gathered her sketches for a new commission. "Workshop's doing well. House is mostly repaired. Might be time to consider making our partnership more permanent." Lily looked up, her heart quickening at the expression in his eyes. "Mr. Dixon, are you proposing to me over wood shavings and sawdust? Seems appropriate," he replied with a smile. "Given that's what brought us together in the first place." He moved around the workbench to stand before her, taking her hands in his. "Lily Adams, I love you, not despite your curves or your stubborn streak or your determination to do things your own way, but because of them. Because you're exactly who you're meant to be, and that person happens to be exactly who I want to spend my life with." Tears pricked at Lily's eyes as she squeezed his hands. "That's the most perfect proposal I could imagine." "Is that a yes?" Sam asked, his own voice suspiciously rough. "Yes," Lily confirmed. 1,000 times yes. Their wedding took place the following spring, once the workshop had established itself as a viable business and the house had been fully repaired and furnished with their own creations. The ceremony was small but joyful, held in the town church with Aunt Harriet, now reconciled to her niece's unconventional choice in the front row. Mabel Green created Lily's wedding dress, a flowing gown of cream-colored silk that followed her natural curves without constraint, allowing her to breathe, move, and dance with ease. As she walked down the aisle toward Sam, who waited with undisguised adoration in his eyes, Lily felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought her to this moment. "You look beautiful," Sam whispered as she reached him at the altar. "You told me not to change a thing," she whispered back. "So I didn't." His smile was all the affirmation she would ever need. Years later, as Lily sat on the porch of their expanded home, watching Sam teach their young son how to sand a piece of wood to silken smoothness, she reflected on the path that had led her here. The workshop had grown into a thriving business, their furniture now sought after throughout Colorado territory for its quality and artistry. The fire that had once threatened Los Animas was a distant memory, though the lesson it had taught about what truly mattered in life remained vivid. Their daughter, barely 2, toddled across the porch to climb into Lily's lap, her small body fitting perfectly against the curves that Lily had once been told to minimize and hide. Now those same curves were a source of comfort and security for her children, a physical manifestation of the abundance that filled their lives. Sam looked up from his lesson, catching Lily's eye across the yard. His smile still made her heart beat faster, even after all these years. With a word to their son to continue practicing, he crossed to the porch and sat beside her, one arm draping naturally around her shoulders. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Dixon," he said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Just thinking about dresses," Lily replied with a smile. "And how sometimes not fitting into one can lead you exactly where you're meant to be," Sam chuckled, drawing her closer against his side. "Best thing that ever happened to me, walking into Mabel's shop that day." "Best thing that ever happened to both of us," Lily corrected, leaning her head against his shoulder as their children played in the yard before them. She had found her place in the world not by changing herself to fit someone else's expectations, but by being exactly who she was, curves and all. And in doing so, she had built a life more beautiful and fulfilling than any she could have imagined that day in Mabel's shop, when a too small dress had seemed like the end of her prospects rather than the beginning of her happiness. "Don't change a thing," Sam had told her then, and she hadn't. "Not one thing,"